special evening, I hear.
It's pretty special. Yeah, we're.
But let's go back a little before we go forward. Who were some of the artists or some of the songs that when you first heard it as a kid growing up, it just flipped your head?
Johnny Cash, Folsom. Helen Merrill was with Clifford Brown. Quincy Jones did this great jazz album with Helen Merrill. And I have my U2 albums. I'm going to admit it. I'm saying some early U2 is pretty amazing. I know that's late in the vinyl life, but I love concerts. I love that live feel. Etta James. Yeah.
And where did you grow up?
I was an Air Force brat, so I grew up all over, and I stayed with my grandmother a lot.
Places, I grew up.
Oh, okay. Well, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas, California, D.C.
Where in Texas?
All of the really not so great parts. Yeah. Oh, so you knew. Lubbock, Abilene. I'm so sorry because now all my Texas fans will be like, "What's wrong with Abilene and Lubbock and El Paso?"
Buddy Holly.
That was the most awesome part of it, and I love. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't even list Buddy Holly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the best thing about Texas is that my father had passed away when I was a little girl, but I understood the music that he loved. He's from Louisiana, and to be able to kind of sit in the actual history of the music and to feel where Buddy Holly would have been, and just that the instruments or guitars maybe back east, but everybody had a skating rink and a church, so you're seeing people using B3s and organs and just a kind of a different flavor.
Well, I always felt, even though I was young, Texas had such a rich musical history.
Yeah.
You could just tell. I always say California and Texas are like countries.
Definitely a country. I remember when I moved there, they had American history, which was about this thick, and then they had world history, and then we had Texas history. So definitely it was, I'd have to say it's left its mark.
That's amazing. Well, tell us how the group all came together, because I'm sure you got all different backgrounds and different influences.
Yeah.
How did this conglomeration evolve?
Well, when I got out of college, I did some disaster relief, and I actually worked with the Salvation Army and had an opportunity to find myself, and ended up coming back to California and working in the banking industry. So I did some banking with churches, and then I ended up working for a Wall Street mortgage firm, and my parents were so excited. But it was like 2007, and there's a little hiccup in the industry, so after about a year, I lost my job. I mean, they had to shut some of their doors. And I thought, I'd really like to, what do I want to do? And I'd always wanted to visit my father's family. He died when I was a little girl. My mother had remarried, and I wanted to meet him and find out who he was. And so I went back and met his family, but I got to meet his childhood friends and find all the bars he used to like to go to, and hear the stories like how he met my mother shirtless on a Harley. I think, oh, there's the troublemaker. That's where I get it from. And I found a journal on the side of the road, had magnolias on it, and I called it the Magnolia Memoir. And I started writing the stories down. And I thought, before I get a real job, I would like to record some songs, because they're very musical. My dad's family in Louisiana, Mississippi, everybody's on the porch playing something. And I thought, I'm going to record these and give them as a gift. And I didn't know anything about that, and a friend of mine introduced me to Alexander Burke, who's our music director, and he put together this group to record once live. I didn't have very much money, so we only had that one day. Our first album's basically live, and that day was such a magical experience that we became a band. We had a publishing deal not long after that, and we got our first record deal a couple years ago. And Aaron is from Big Sur, and he's on the first album. Gordon's from Pennsylvania. Alex was born here in Los Angeles, but spent a lot of time in Chicago. And Keith's a Georgia boy, and single ladies. And so I think we've all come here and brought pieces of America. We're definitely an American band. Yeah.
I talked to a lot of our great British singers and all that. Just talked to Paul Rogers, interviewed him at the Grammy Museum.
Oh.
And they were all in love with the American blues, the rhythm and blues, on the heartland of America makes the Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones,
Yeah.
the Beatles, the Bad Companies, the Freeze, all of them melt.
Yeah.
They idolize American music, from the heartland, from Texas and Mississippi,
Yeah.
Alabama and Georgia, and California. And, it's always amazing to see because so many of the bands that came after them idolized the British, and they didn't know that the real heroes of the Beatles were the Chuck Berrys and Buddy
Yeah.
Hollys and Little Richards.
Well, my mom was British. My grandmother, who I spent a lot of time with, was born in London, and I didn't realize that that's one of the reasons I had such an influence, because she was definitely into all of these artists from the 50s and 60s, and that's what she was listening to, was this infusion of blues. And it's so interesting that the British side and the American side of me collide when I'm in Louisiana and Mississippi, but it all made sense. And it's in the air. Like, you're sitting at a diner off the side of the road, and it just seeps in, that feel, that swagger, that Mississippi swagger. And I think you can hear it seeping into Pale Fire and Ash and Bone. And it's been interesting to explore all that.
It's amazing stuff. It all comes from the struggle or the passion or the emotion of growing up, in a lot of cases, against the grain or, on your own. Tell us about some of your favorite songs on the album and, what's the story behind it for you?
Well, we weren't really sure if we were going to stay together as a group. We were so excited for our last album, Perfect Crime, and there was some changes in staffing for the label, and we got kind of caught in the crossfire. So a few weeks after the album came out, it was shelved. And Alex and I didn't really know what to do. And we had an opportunity to go to New Zealand because of one of my series, and started writing. And the first song that we definitely officially wrote for the band was Odds and Ends. We had a song that we didn't finish, and we haven't finished yet, but I went off and tried to do a bridge, and he tried to make a bridge, and neither of them are right, but we put them together, these two mixed odd pieces, and it became Odds and Ends. And that's literally what we penned it before there were lyrics. And it's kind of the theme song for the album. It's like, what do we have? Who are we? And I think you can feel from Ash and Bone to Resurrected the journey of that kind of, that pale fire moment with, like, okay, I guess it's not what I wished for. And then there's that Odds and Ends, like, well, this is what we got, a pocket full of friends. And it just started to roll into this perfect musical photograph of who we were as musicians. And it was unexpected. We weren't writing for a label or for a genre. So Silence in the Ache was recorded live at Neil Finn's studio, Roundhead in Auckland. And we were done. We thought it was maybe going to be a demo, but it's the live front to back. Neil Baldock engineered, and it's got the real live plate reverb, and it was just a caught moment. So even though Brandon Friesen stepped in and produced some amazing tracks, Ash and Bone, which has got that swagger, and he used to work with Native Americans extensively, so he picked up that Choctaw in me and wanted to kind of have that it's a Mississippi thing, and he was smart enough to pick that up. But inside of these Peeling Paint, Hemingway, Ash and Bone, and Resurrected, that's kind of cinematic, you have these pale fire, raw moments of silence and ache and life before, and the wait. All three of those tracks kind of capture us as a live band. So we didn't leave that part of us behind. It allowed us to kind of step back and reassess. And I think you feel that in the music. I don't have a favorite song. They're all our story. But I think I'm excited about the fact that we kept the pale fire moment of Odds and Ends and Silence in the Ache from the beginning to the 4th Street sessions, and that was The Wait, and then the live sessions at Werewolf Heart that make up the rest of the album.
All that you've been through and what you've seen, the development of your craft and this artistry, what advice do you give to the young talent today? Because they're coming up in a different world.
Yeah.
But it's so important for them to find their own lane,
Yeah.
their own voice.
I think people thought that the internet and computers would be the end of live music and real music. I think it's been the exact opposite. We have a generation now born in the 90s who have had access to more music than you know, anybody before. And I think when you've been inundated with perhaps insincere moments, computerized, prefabricated, they get it now. So now you have a kind of listener, like 15 to 20, that wants the real deal. They're looking at the archives and they're finding these great performances from artists, but they're actually also creating those performances. I'm astounded to work with, you know, some of the people we work with 18 that are fully realized artists, and they're so present, and I'm excited because the response is they've grown up without genres deciding what they get to listen to on a radio station. So the music that's being created these days isn't about a genre, it's about a story. It's about who I am, and it can have, you know, hip hop meets electronica with a little bit of the blues, and it's all, and there's a sense of wanting to preserve the root of it and then repurpose it. And it's exciting. And I would just encourage people to think outside of the genre and to live your memoir and to write your story in your music. And I think everybody has a different canvas, you know, whether you're living in New York or you're in Mississippi or here in LA, and just be authentic about what you're working with. And people can feel it, they'll want to watch it, they'll want to find it and relate to it.
So rather than blend in, stand out and really accentuate your uniqueness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many people just want to blend in.
Well, I'm not for blending in. We're all for outside the lines.
That's great. Well, tell us about this special evening, because I hear like records were made in the early days.
Yeah.
Doing,
well, literally in about 15 minutes, it's a direct to vinyl. They have restored the lathe in the back, and they are recording straight to vinyl tonight. So it's a special night, but I do have, because of my series that I do for voiceover and animation, fans in England and Australia. Hope you guys are getting to see this. And they don't get to come to all our concerts. But what's great about even beyond a live video is to have a live recording, and you are literally in the room. You can feel that energy. So I'm really excited to share that moment on vinyl.
So in other words, you're performing without a net. What you do is forever on the record.
Yeah, I don't think some of the greatest painters had numbers underneath. Yeah.
There's no shortcuts.
No, but I think there's beauty in the imperfection.
That's what we say. Is, you know, creativity is not perfect.
Mm.
The human quality of that is what makes it exciting and unique.
Yeah. On our record Pale Fire, the cover is by Matthias Haker. He's a photographer who did a series about beauty and decay. And instead of thinking that we need to clean up or restore, there's these extraordinary places that have been war-torn and blown out, and that's one of the image on the cover. And there's an extraordinary beauty in its destruction and decay. And I think that we're fans of that in our music and our lyrics and our expression.
Thank you so much for your time. We can't wait to be part of history here and spread the word.
Thank you very much.